Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your meeting. I'm really grateful to be here and to tell you a little bit about my story. I've lived with lymphedema since I was 5, but it wasn't really until I was in my 30s that I learned how to properly manage it well. And I'm going to tell you the story of how I got there. The first picture on the left was kind of my awakening moment where I wanted things to change. And the last picture is kind of where I've gotten to today. I'm going to get some water. Somebody have a cup of water they can get me? Thanks. Thank you. After a tragic series of events, I realized that I had to be my own advocate. And I began to take my power back through my self-care. I'll be okay, thank you. Because at times, living with lymphedema can sometimes feel like you have a speeding train that is zipping through all the stations, and it's not stopping. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and just progressing. And I so wanted to stop that train. I so wanted to figure out how to reverse that train. But thankfully, I'm healthier now than I was in my 20s. I'm grateful that I have lymphedema. It's not something I would have thought I could say when I was younger, but it taught me how to be courageous, strong, resilient, and creative. And I'm so grateful to see how many creative minds are here today. And you're all really interested in the lymphatic system. It's so cool. The other lesson I have is to be my own advocate so that others don't have to struggle like I did. And to remember that our bodies are amazing. They're really capable of healing. And they're beautiful just the way they are. Let me tell you a story. 7 years ago, I was laying on a hospital gurney with a severe cellulitis infection of my entire right leg. I was in excruciating pain. It was my 26th such infection since my early 20s. Tears were streaming down my face, and I held my head in my hands. I was sobbing uncontrollably. It had all started, thank you. It had all started 36 hours before, when I got into the ER with a suspected cellulitis infection, remembering previous advice I'd been given that, Amy, with your history of infections, don't wait. Get to the emerge as soon as you can. When I got there, I knew how to spot the infections, even before I got the trademark red rash. I was seen by the doctors after waiting 8 hours in the ER that Sunday, but without the red rash, I wasn't given any antibiotics, and I was sent home. I was dumbfounded and confused. In the past, health professionals had generally taken my infection seriously and understood that I could lose my legs if I didn't get them under control. For me, getting infection is one of the worst complications of lymphedema. It can affect you physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially. And it affects our ability, like what Peter was saying, to be independent and mobile. It really can take that away in a matter of hours. This is what my leg looked like a few weeks before that really serious infection. As you can see, my right leg on the side looks pretty much like a normal right leg. It wasn't that swollen. I could even fit into skinny jeans. I was really impressed. To a couple weeks later, when I finally was on the hospital gurney and was getting antibiotics, and I had the trademark red rash. that I knew was going to show up. To a few days later, when I was still going to daily IV therapy, and you can see how much bigger my leg is. My stockings didn't fit, my pants didn't fit, no shoes in my house fit, even my husband's. My leg was very swollen. So to even get to appointments for IV is a problem, right? Let alone taking care of myself and my young children. So that day felt really heavy. And underneath that sadness, I also had a lot of frustration that was brewing below the surface. The antibiotics had saved my legs and my life many times over, and I was very grateful for that. However, my life was beginning to feel like a hamster wheel, recovering from an infection to only get another one that was even stronger than the last. The antibiotics affect our whole microbiome, not just where you have cellulitis. So my skin, my gut, and my mind were getting to be in disarray from so many antibiotics. I was getting food intolerances, and my anxiety was going up. I began to wonder if the drugs just might not be strong enough one day, if my body would get too used to them, and they might stop working. A part of me began to wonder if there was just something more I could do for my body that I didn't see before. So that day that I broke down on the hospital gurney with nurses staring at me, wondering why I was crying so hard. I knew I had to do something different. And I began to have a voice in my head, from my heart, and said, there has to be more than this. There has to be another way. So I let that just repeat in my mind over and over, and let that fuel me to help me find answers. I had a young family and 2 beautiful girls and a husband. So I dug deep and I listened to that voice. I started to embrace holistic health modalities. I started trying anything that I could find to just see what happens. I tried different diets, meditation, yoga, self-care, and before this time, when I was getting the infections, I was considered a really compliant patient. So I was taking care of my skin, I was wearing compression 24/7, I was doing daily exercise, but it wasn't enough for me. Once you get an infection, it feels like you're prone to get more and more. And so all the self-care habits weren't stacking up to be enough. So if I wanted to make some changes, I knew I needed to look at things differently so that what I was looking at would change. As a former health librarian, I used my information detective skills and I began searching for anything I could find. After all, lymphedema is felt worldwide. There's people in many different countries and cities all over the world with it. And so there had to be some other lymphies that were out there that were thriving with it, and there had to be some other ways to treat it. And I made it a mission to find that out. Back in 2016, I decided I would be brave and put my story up on Instagram. I had 0 followers at the time, and that was okay. I just was hoping I could find other people with lymphedema, some of them are in this room, and learn from them and build a community together. Because having a community can make such a big difference, mentally, physically, and emotionally. I'm sure we can all relate to that when we think about who's in our community that we really love. One of the cool things about finding a community of other lymphies was that I could see how others were coping with the same thing that I was coping with. It also helped me feel seen and understood in a new way. You can also find solutions together, which I found really empowering. We motivate each other. We share experiences and what has helped bounce back after we have a setback. We share lymphedema jokes, like the bandage monster that comes in the night and rips off your bandages, and you find them in the morning. You blame it on the bandage monster. And we even lift each other up and be a shoulder when you just can't lymphy that day. It was in this community that I first learned about lymphatic microsurgeries, as well as many different self-care habits. And I started to include those different self-care habits that I was talking about before. And I started to look into the surgeries. What I was finding by connecting with other lymphies and really taking a different look at how we can look at lymphedema was I realized it really is a whole body experience. We may approach the treatment mostly from a physical side and think about, what can help that person alleviate those symptoms, and that is really, really important. But there's a whole other piece to it, to realize that it affects our emotions, our social health, our spiritual, how we contribute to our family, whether we can work or not. And all those things come into play. Along the way, I decided I'd become a herbalist. I was really enjoying making my own self-care potions and learning about plants, and I kind of fell in love with them. So I started making different teas and tinctures and trying them out on myself. I thought, who better to experiment than on myself? Sorry, I just lost my spot. Also at this time, I was looking into the surgeries, and I came across a surgeon in France that I really wanted to meet. Her name is Dr. Crane Becker. Oh, sorry. There she is with me there. She'd been doing lymphatic microsurgeries in Europe for 25 plus years at the time. So I thought she would be a really good person to talk to about it and find out if I was a candidate or not. I got to go over and have what's called a lymphatic MRI, where they do imaging on my legs, and it's so much better than lymphoscintigraphy. You get better imaging, and it's not painful for the patient at all. They were able to see what was going on in my legs. The dark zones in the picture up above, which is one of the images from the lymphatic MRI, shows where there is lymphatic pooling and poor drainage. I found out I was a candidate for the surgery, and that the surgery also had a really good chance of reducing my risk of infections. That I was really excited about. I went back 9 months later to have my first surgery with Dr. Becker. She did a SAPL procedure, which is called suction-assisted protein lobectomy, and a VLNT on my left leg. So it was the bigger leg in the first picture. And I'd had that lymphedema in my left leg since age 5. So we decided we'd start there and remove the fibrotic tissue that had built up over the years. Because when you have really fibrotic tissue, no matter how much you compress, it's not necessarily going to break it up. So this was an innovative solution to help me get rid of some of that fibrotic tissue that had built up from all the infections. She was saying that each time you have an infection like that, it builds up scar tissue in the body that just doesn't compress well. Surgery for me was a game changer. I had the surgery in February, and that was the picture on the left in the gray there. but the night before my surgery on my left leg. Just a few short months later in May, when I had my fitter measure me for new stockings, when I was finally out of my bandages, you can see how much of a difference in my leg volume. She's holding the measuring tape of where my leg used to be. And you can see below that there's a significant gap. My quality of life was drastically improved. My mobility was better. I felt lighter, and it was less painful. The middle picture in the gray there is after I'd had SAPL on my right leg, which I had done here in Canada. We now have some surgeons in Canada that can perform the lymphatic surgeries, and it's covered by our health insurance. Yay! The first one was not. I had to fight with Alberta Health. I appealed it. I did everything they asked. They kept throwing me things that made me feel like I was on a hamster wheel of like, well, you need to find this information. And I'd go off and do that, and I'd send it back to them. Oh, no, sorry, we actually needed this. Okay, fine, I'll go and get that. Here you go. And it, unfortunately, did not work, and I was not covered. But thankfully, the second one was, and I'm very grateful for that. Recovery from these surgeries is no joke, and they're definitely not a cure. You really need strong self-care before and after to make the best of it. But my leg was so much smaller and lighter, it really lifted my spirits. I could get back to living. One thing that was really cool that came out of the surgeries that I wasn't expecting is both legs changed, even though I only had the surgery done on one leg at each time. So when they operated on my left leg, my right leg shrank almost the same amount that they'd removed from my left. And so it mirrored it in a drop in volume. And Dr. Becker, my doctors, all my different health professionals, my massage therapists were all dumbfounded by that, including myself. It was a wonderful thing to have happened. The same thing happened when I had surgery on the right leg. My left leg got better, too. So it really helped me see just how interconnected our bodies really are and how capable they are of healing when we give them the right tools. The belief that there has to be another way had guided me to this moment. If I hadn't had that traumatic event, watching my leg balloon, and felt like I wasn't going to get better, I'm not sure I'd be where I am today. There are valuable lessons in all our experiences and all our stories if we're willing to see them. So what's my life like today? Today, I really embrace a holistic, integrative approach, using the best of what Western medicine can offer me in terms of compression, pumps, and the lymphatic microsurgeries, and incorporating a strong self-care routine of skincare, eating healthy, exercise, and different compression therapies. When I looked at it holistically, one thing that was really eye-opening for me in how we approach lymphedema is really remembering that there's a person with lymphedema and that they have passions, they have needs, they have families, they have desires that they want to get back to, and remembering and finding ways to support them so that they can get there. Along the way, after finding about herbalism and really loving that, but there wasn't really a framework of how to integrate lymphedema-specific self-care. It wasn't actually even talked much about herbalism. It wasn't until I came across Ayurveda where my eyes were opened again in a new way. They consider the lymphatic system to be the most important system in the body. I almost fell off my chair when I read that. And the reason they think that is that water is the source of life. It's how oxygen moves around to all our tissues. It's how our body nourishes. It's how our body takes away waste. and every single cell in your body needs water to function. So with that approach, I finally had a framework to look at and follow and guide me. So today, my self-care is less about finding fixes and solutions to make my lymphedema better, and it's more about daily self-care rituals and routines that can support my whole body, so that it's almost like you're filling up a piggy bank every day, and you've got something to help you stay in balance. So I do everything from dry brushing every day in the morning to stimulate my lymphatic system. I make sure that I check my skin. I have kind of a check system. I call it the 4 T's. So I check for texture, temperature, and tenderness on my legs to see how they're doing after I've unwrapped them. And then I'll apply moisturizer, have a shower, things like that, before I put on my compression. The second part is making sure I wear really high quality compression. I love the ones from Bauerfeind. They're been a game changer for me since I got to try them. I also make sure I include movement throughout my day, not just going to the gym for 1 hour and then sitting for 8 hours. It just doesn't work when you have lymphedema. You have to be able to get up and move around several times a day, or have a job that makes you more mobile in the first place, can help. So I find ways to work in a little bit of yoga here and there, or walks, swimming, biking, to go get my groceries instead of driving, things like that. I still include a lot of herbal medicine into what I do. So I have teas and tinctures that I include throughout the day. And depending on the seasons, I change those as well to help stay in flow with nature. And the biggest part of all is what we eat, as we are what we digest or don't digest. So I include whole foods, less minimally processed foods, and intermittent fasting, and I follow a seasonal diet. So as you can see, it can be possible to go from just surviving to thriving. Learning to manage my lymphedema changed my life. My life is so much brighter now, thanks to advocacy and self-care. We can learn so much from the lived experience, and that's why I'm so grateful that you guys invited me here today. I've been focusing on serving the community in the last couple of years, offering publications, workshops, events, and my website, where you can find information about the lived experience. I thought I'd include a couple slides about why I love the Bauerfeind products and CuraFlow. I've actually been using Bauerfeind for over 5 years. It was my surgeon who first told me about the Bauerfeind products when we were getting ready for my surgery in France. And she told me to find the knee braces and the soft ankle braces to use as my pre and post-op care to help squish the fluids out from around my joint areas and make sure there wasn't going to be more pooling there. So I've been using them for a while and really love them. When I had an opportunity last year to try CuraFlow, I jumped on board. I was really curious about what the stockings would be like. Having lived with lymphedema for over 40 years now, I was keen to see how they stand up. And I find them really, really wonderful. They hold my swelling, but they're responsive to my movement. Some garments out there are so rigid, you feel held, but if you try and move with them, it's almost painful or too restrictive, or it hurts behind the knees, or they chafe your skin. They kind of rub it off because the fabric is so rough. So you have to be careful about that. But these are softer, they're responsive, They're comfortable to wear even in the summer. Can't say that about every compression out there, for sure. And I'm finding them really long-lasting. So I'm here all weekend, but other ways you can connect with me are my email there and my website, and I have an Instagram following that I love chatting about the lived experience. Thank you so much.